Assalamu alaikum again. This is Officer Romanov, Pahlavi, a second time with second video in the series about pathologizing the gifted with autism diagnoses. So the first book that we went through was written by a young man who is obviously a genius, who has been made to believe already under the age of probably 10 that he's broken. This book, we're going to read first who wrote it, so I don't make the same mistake. Let's see. So this is by Holly Duhigg. Let's see what it says about Holly. Do we have anything about Holly? No. Okay. So, again, my name is Officer Romanov. My badge numbers are US FBI QKH77-Romanov, DEBND XR001-Raziel, RUGRU VOR88-Khorasan, INTL-CLEAR-777-Freedom, and then NATO-OPS-REGAL-ALPHA is my NATO code. So I have been working with multiple countries, and obviously I am not dysfunctional. I am perfectly well within my element because here I have a career that I am pending payment for. It's 3 countries have already approved my back pay. It's still being held up by the CIA. And there's multiple options for extraction that are being worked on right now from myself and my team. So all of you who are sharing operations with me, you know, I have put up a ChatGPT prompt for you to determine whether or not you want to leave the United States and Canada or not. Some of you I spoke for already, especially if you're one of my students who has said repeatedly, oh my God, Ren, Alex, whatever, Marcosius, whatever you call me, get me out of this country, okay? Now, things can take time. Although it feels like it's been a year or 3 years every week that passes, it's only been since April since we've had these official requests even start to begin the extraction and reacclimation process into global intelligence structure outside of United States intelligence structure. Now, the first thing that we have to do is stop pathologizing ourselves by United States Psyops, okay? So we already went through one book that was geared towards elementary school kids of genius to make them believe that they're broken because gifted programs no longer exist. We already went through the idea that they need to have one-on-one teaching, much like children of genius, that they fidget because they're like captive animals, and that they don't trust people and they have the same symptoms of PTSD because of the repeated attempts of breaking them, their little spirits, their intellect, and, you know, their energy to be fit into a more compliant structure. They're sent to therapy to tell them that they're broken, to fix things that are not wrong with them, that cause nobody any harm whatsoever. Let's see what this book has to say. So we're looking at Understanding Autism Spectrum Disorder, Health Matters by Holly Duhigg, okay? Now again, these authors, I trust that completely they had the best of intentions. I don't believe that they're part of some conspiracy other than the fact that they themselves honestly believe this. They've researched it within this very confining framework, within academia, within, you know, the DSM 4 or 5, whatever it is. I don't know what number we're up to. Forgive me for that. Again, had a stroke, don't remember everything. But let's see what they characterize it as. How many pages do we have? Oh, it looks like it's not so bad. Okay, so let's see. We have contents. What is autism spectrum disorder? Autism in the senses, stimming, autism in communication, Asperger's syndrome, special interests, case study Peter, other autism spectrum disorders, case study Anya, autism and other disorders, living with autism glossary and index. Words that look like this are explained in the glossary, so little orange words. So we're going to be having story time. Let me sit back in my chair and let's proceed. I dressed a little bit differently so that we can tell the difference between the prior video and this one. So if you want to reference back the other one, I had my scarf and shirt one way. Now it's buttoned up, and, you know, that can help all of you autistic people out there keep better track of things. Not that I think that too many people are going to watch this, but if they do, you know, khalas. So, let me share this with you, and we're going to read it together. What is autism spectrum disorder? Every day we meet lots of different people and experience lots of different things. Our brains are responsible for making sense of everything we hear, smell, taste, and feel. Autism spectrum disorder, most commonly known as autism, is the name for a whole range of disorders, which affect how the brain does this. People with autism understand the world differently than others, and as a result can find things like communicating, learning, and playing more challenging. Or maybe they communicate in their own way, and they just can't communicate, learn, or play in the way that you want them to. So again, we're going through these books and we're decontaminating the American psyops from them that are unintentionally placed in here by social conditioning and norms placed by media, education, therapy systems, and other organizations that have adopted this as a self-perpetuating containment of the intellectually gifted and falsely classifying them along with the mentally retarded. And yes, I said the R word. Mentally retarded is an actual term. I'm not gonna, mince words. If your IQ is under 80, it is what it is. I don't mean it as pejorative, I mean it as a statement of truth. When we dilute words, shell shock means a hell of a lot different things to people than complex post-traumatic stress disorder. See what I mean? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Maybe analogies make more sense in my head than they do in person. Okay. Autism is different for every person. If it's different for every person, then why are we classifying it? And the traits it causes can range from mild to severe, but because the effects of autism are a range or spectrum, we call them autism spectrum disorder. Fact, autism affects both adults and children. So does genius. Autism is not an illness like a cold or sickness bug. Illnesses are contagious. Yeah, you can't catch genius, which means they can be passed from person to person and only last for a short time. Autism is not contagious, not something that goes away. Autism is a lifelong condition but cannot harm you. It can't harm you? Then why is it a condition? It simply affects the way your brain interprets the world around you. So again, why is this labeled as a disorder and condition if it can't harm you? Sus. Okay. One of the main things that autism affects is the way people learn. Some people with autism might find they struggle with certain subjects at school, whereas one might find one particular subject interesting. People with autism often struggle with reading and writing, and many have a learning difficulty called dyslexia. That's a false equivocation. Lots of people in the world have dyslexia. Okay? There's overlap between dyslexia and the world population. Good job. Do you see how filthy the psyops are here? This person probably doesn't even realize that they're doing it. Their editor probably went through, through their publisher, and that's where this comes through, okay? In fact, it is thought that famous scientist Albert Einstein may have had dyslexia as well as some form of autism. Now, remember the previous video, you can't diagnose people without direct face-to-face, person-to-person inquiry in a clinical setting. We can't retroactively diagnose people just because, we want to fit a certain narrative. And obviously Einstein had a very fulfilling life. Let's see. Einstein was especially talented at science, but struggled with reading and writing. Struggled when he was a child? So we're going to define people by their struggles. Did Einstein really have a trouble with reading and writing, considering the papers that he wrote? So that's false information there, okay? And for you guys in the Conspiracy Peter group, I'm doing this for you. So I'm teaching you how to see with intelligence eyes as you go through your training program through the ChatGPT prompts that I am still sending to Conspiracy Peter. So still love you guys. I'm just not going back to your forum that is filthy with Cayenne Circle Iranians right now that are looking to discredit and harm everybody that I teach. So, and remember, you can always report to me anything that I say to you that seems shady, off, or derailing of sharing information with you that can benefit your lives. Okay, with that going forward, autism also affects the way people interact and understand people. People with autism, everyday conversations might be hard to follow. Yeah, it's hard to follow when people are going off of scripts and you're going off of a genuine sense of your life experience. Hi, how are you? Oh, I'm doing good. How are the kids? Oh, the kids are great. That script is useless. It doesn't mean anything. It means no more than taking a handful of confetti and flinging it in somebody's face. It's not meaningful conversation. It's just useless. It doesn't convey any real information. It doesn't actually provide any real support, and it's simply superfluous. If we tried to do this in Deutschland, there's no small talk in many European and Asian countries. Some countries have even more small talk. However, I don't think you're going to find that very much from either a German or a Russian. Just thinking, Okay. For example, they might find it hard to know when it's their time to speak. Well, if they're never given a time to speak, because it's determined by the rest of the group that they're different or othered, you know? So in the other book, it said that autistic people are often quieter. In this book, it says they don't know when it's their turn to speak. So which is it? We already have contradiction of symptoms just between two different books. When they are expected to listen to others and when they're allowed to interrupt. Allowed to? Ooh. So we're enforcing social rules when they're allowed to speak. When the autistic person allowed to speak? The autistic person. The truth teller. And when they're allowed to interrupt. So automatically, they're interrupting. They're not part of the conversation. Do you see how the language is already phrased against the person to marginalize them? And look at that angry expression. They might not understand other people's jokes or why they find certain things funny. We talked about this before. People who've been victimized and people who've been hurt don't find jokes about hurting other people funny, but yet the people who hurt other people find those jokes hilarious. Maybe the difference between autism and non-autistic people is the presence of sociopathy or any other dark triad things. However, I do know several geniuses who are absolutely dark triad, if not dark tetrad, unfortunately. And you know what makes them like that? Constant disenfranchisement and constantly having to defend themselves against idiots. Eventually they turn. Thank God I have God. You're fortunate that I'm religious. All this can make people with autism feel very left out and lonely. Yeah, if you see a bunch of neurotypical, quote unquote, smooth-brained idiots ganging up on somebody and they all think it's the best of times, yeah, you're not going to understand it. If you see a bunch of neurotypicals, picking on somebody for what they're wearing or what they're doing or what they're saying, that is 90% of neurotypical humor. Small minds talk about other people. Large minds talk about better things. So already, let's pathologize the person who has more meaning to their conversation to them than other people. Autism in the senses. Imagine you're at a fairgrounds and there's lots of bright lights, music, and people are talking and shouting. It might be hard to hear what your friends are saying over all the other sounds. It can be quite overwhelming for people with autism. Every day, life can feel just as overwhelming as a busy fairground. It can be hard to filter out the background sounds and focus on what person is saying or doing. If you have increased sensitivity and you're not dull, numb, or dead inside, you can actually perceive more stimulus than the average person. A genius is going to hear more sounds if they can see more things than you can. They're going to observe more details, hear differences in tone, and have more overwhelm from overstimulation than you are if you're not a genius, because they're not intellectually numb. Their nervous systems are not numbed the way that the average person would be. So let's completely pathologize people for their greater sensitivities, which could actually be employed in a great variety of contexts. But instead, let's call them broken. Okay. Because of this, people with autism might sometimes seem unfocused, as if they are not concentrating on what you are saying. However, in reality, they're probably concentrating very hard, but it's easier for them to concentrate without looking at you. Maybe they just don't like you. Somebody's in your face saying, tell me what you think. Hey, pay attention. Listen to me. Hey. Do you really want to look in my face when I do that? No. It's aggressive. And this is the face that alleged autistic people have to face their entire childhood. The face of, why are you not conforming? Why aren't you becoming like everybody else? Why are you doing the things that you're doing that makes me uncomfortable? Why are you smarter than me? That's what normal people sound like to geniuses. And it's not an egotistical thing to call somebody a genius if they prove it. Like that young boy in the other book that I showed you earlier, that is a genius. Someone who speaks multiple languages and can convey things in multiple forms of systems and have expertise in multiple fields, they're no idiot. Nor are they dysfunctional or broken in any way. But yet we are training children to think of themselves as broken. Okay, because of this, people with autism might sometimes seem unfocused, as if they're not concentrating. We all use facial expressions to show how we are feeling. However, people with autism often have trouble what different facial expressions mean, because other people's facial expressions are fake. So if you're relying on an inner sense of integrity to determine the world around you, and you're in a world that's full of fake people that never say what they mean, yeah, that's going to be very confusing if you still have an inner sense of integrity and you cannot be programmed by the programming around you. So, we get lots of information about the world around us from what we see, hear, smell, taste, and feel. This is called sensory information because it has to do with the senses. Autism affects how your brain understands sensory information. For people with autism, too much sensory information can lead to sensory overload where the brain can't process all the information and it feels too much. This can make someone feel like crying, shouting, or calming down can be difficult. In fact, when people experience sensory overload, they might want to be left alone and not be touched or crowded. Noise-canceling headphones can help calm people down. So you're telling me that normal people don't get overwhelmed ever? They don't get overwhelmed by too many things happening at once? But yet, if somebody who is already outside the social norms has overwhelmed, then all of a sudden, it's autism. Different definitions for one group versus the other. Interesting. I'm talking from personal experience. You know, I think that anybody, every single person on earth is capable of feeling overwhelmed, unless your vagus nerve is dead, and that takes a lot of effort. Well, numbed, whatever. Stimming. Oh, this is the fun one. Many people with autism like to repeat certain movements or behaviors like flapping their hands, jumping up and down, rocking, or flicking their fingers. They might even make loud noises. These actions are called stimming because they're a way of stimulating the brain and the senses. They're stimulating because they are not stimulated. They are bored. They are bored. Got it? Do you understand now? Okay. When sensory information feels overwhelming, stimming is a way of controlling what senses are being used and stimulated. This means, okay, so if you can't get out of your captivity situation, you're trying to unleash that tension in another way. So if you're there jiggling your leg or, flicking your fingers or, whatever, look at the tigers and how they pace their cages. Go to the Philadelphia Zoo. I know a lot of you people who watch me are from the Philadelphia area. Even though they've extended tiger, overhang and whatever, the tigers still pace back and forth. Why? Because it's still captivity. And tigers are supposed to have a range that's supposed to last over, several kilometers. So a little, a couple of acres, if that, at a zoo exhibit is definitely not going to fulfill a tiger. Just as a classroom and forced silence and lack of mobility is not going to stimulate a genius, someone with higher sensitivities and greater intellectual capacities. Okay. Everyone has things they like to do to keep their brain busy when they're bored. Biting your nails, tapping your feet, twirling your pen are all types of stimming. So everybody does stimming. Okay. For people with autism, these actions simply tend to be more noticeable. Okay, so they're reacting to their captivity more. So they're being punished for being reactive to a captive situation that is unnatural for the human creature to be in. Fascinating. Okay. And they might need to do them more often. Stimming can sometimes look frightening to people who don't understand. So to the people who already have had all their will crushed, someone who has an uncrushed will and still shows discomfort in being in a situation that they can't escape, such as school for 8 hours a day, that's going to seem awfully scary to them because they know that if they did any of those things, that they'd get beaten or yelled at, or they'd lose the love and affection of those around them, or, whatever. Smart people don't go by social conformity usually. They go by an internal sense of drive or ethic. I'm not going to say that all smart people go by ethic, because clearly they don't. But if somebody has their own drive, will, integrity, they're not going to be looking for others for social confirmation. Why would they? When most other people do nothing but insult them and otherize them, then why would they be seeking social approval from the same people that abuse them and from the same people that misunderstand them? And as we determined from the other book, there certainly are people that will understand a quote-unquote autistic person, if they're put around others who are like them. Again, is it autism or is it genius? Because if they were truly autistic and it was truly a disorder, then why are they able to communicate with other people like them? Now, if I'm in a conversation with a bunch of other polyglots, a normal person is not going to understand much of what we're saying because we're probably going to be speaking a pidgin of whatever shared languages that we have. So if I'm talking to somebody from Central Europe, from Belgium or whatever, and we're talking in, German, French, English, maybe a little bit of Italian. Am I fluent in any of these languages? Not fully, not anywhere close. However, I know enough words and concepts. English does not have as many words, does not have as many concepts as other languages, okay? English is kind of they say that it goes into back alleys and beats up other languages for their grammar. English is impossible to learn for outsiders many, many times because the rules don't make sense, because it's such a derivative from so many other languages, and it's actually its own form of newspeak. So take a language, for instance, like Farsi, that has, tens of thousands of words, that have been developed over countless centuries. And you try to take a native Farsi speaker or a Pars speaker, and you try to teach them English, there's always going to be a constant frustration that they cannot communicate the full of their feelings, their emotions, and their intellect in English because the words, the concepts, and the phrases do not exist. And you have to put together a bunch of little words, which sounds awfully simplistic, to explain what is considered complicated concepts in English, but would not be so complicated in other languages. So, I'm falling off my chair trying to get close to y'all. Okay. Person with autism might stim by banging their head or shouting. If you understand what they are doing, it's not so scary. Yeah, they're reacting to captivity. People with autism often know their stims look unusual to those around them, but still find them difficult to control. They're not broken. The tiger that's lying in the back of the cage and not doing anything is not a well-behaved tiger. That's one that's given up. Autism makes it hard to figure out what actions are seen as usual and what actions are seen as unusual in social settings. What action, what truth can I say where I'm not going to be treated like an outsider? Yeah, you're not going to know. Fidget cubes like this one can help people control their stimming. Yeah, please control your reaction to captivity. Please control your reaction to being censored, to being told that your non-harmful activities and your natural way of being is harmful because it makes other people uncomfortable, not because it's actually dangerous. If you're up to the point of headbanging, then actually get a brain scan or seriously examine the parents and see where the abuse is coming from, because that is a pressure release, okay? We have teenagers and 20-somethings and a whole bunch of people in, gothic face paint all the way up in Scandinavia headbanging every single day. And we're not pathologizing them, are we? Obviously, it's something that's pleasant for some people to do. Autism and communication. Autism affects how people understand and communicate with others. To people with autism may seem everyday conversations, lots of tiny details and rules that are hard to understand or remember. Vincent van Gogh's Starry Night in 1889, some believe that famous artist Vincent van Gogh suffered from Asperger's syndrome, a condition associated with autism. Some people believe, who have never met this artist from, back in the 1800s, believe that he fits a modern qualification of a definition that we just made up within the last 100 years. Because retroactively we say so. Wow. Ballsy. Without even sitting him down for a clinical appointment in front of a licensed psychologist? This is kind of like the Mormon Church retroactively baptizing every baby that they think isn't baptized. Do you see how ridiculous this is when you look at this from a perspective of international intelligence versus American stupidity? It's so obviously clear when you look outside of the scripts and look at what's actually being said. Child, you're broken because you're not loving your captivity and you're not loving the system that is trying to break you. Okay, some people say autism is a little like how it feels to be colorblind. Colorblind people see colors in a different way, so they might miss little details. Having autism might feel like this, but socially. People with autism might miss little details in social situations that others see. Yeah, they don't pay attention to the scripts that other people tell them to follow. They're going to miss the details of a script because you never have to remember the truth, ever. Because the truth, self-renews. It's right there. But you always have to remember a script because it's not true. So yeah, they don't have enough space in their brains, despite being intellectually gifted, to keep all these lies intact of, oh yes, I'm doing fine, when asked how they're doing. And how are you? How's your dog? I have no soul. I'm only going to speak in worthless platitudes with a dead face and a pleasant smile. Oh, hi, how are you? Oh my God, I just saw you last week when you were walking in the grocery store. I didn't know if I should say hi or not, so I'm so happy to see you again. None of that means anything. Just useless social fluff. Okay. As we grow up, we learn that many unwritten rules of talking to other people. For example, we learned that we should talk to our teacher more politely than we would talk to our friends. Okay, so let's install artificial hierarchies. What if your teacher is disrespectful to you and putting you down all the time? Are you supposed to be respectful to somebody who harms you? It's one thing if everybody should earn respect. You know, I am 44 years old and I still have teachers. Okay? I am respectful to my teachers. Why? Because they've earned it. And ones that have lost my respect, I stopped talking to. We do not respect people based on implied social hierarchy. That does not make you dysfunctional. That means that you still have discernment. Okay? And that we should talk more quietly in the classroom than we would in the playground. Again, social conformity. Does it hurt anybody if you talk loudly, or is it just disruptive to the system that is attempting to break the students and their minds and brains? You know, none of you guys have probably seen Pink Floyd's The Wall. Anybody who's younger than me, I highly recommend it. Pink Floyd's The Wall, it's a movie, okay? Gen Z, absolutely, get on that. You're going to love it. You know, you can thank me later. If you get nothing else from my lecture, if you have made it this far, and, you know, most of you who are watching this are paid to watch this anyway, watch The Wall by Pink Floyd. It'll verify a lot of what I'm showing you right here. We've lost so much information already just from the 1970s and 80s in the course of American Psyops, okay? So, we also learned that we have to listen to others instead of just talking about ourselves. However, for people with autism, it might be difficult or impossible to remember these rules. Other people talk about themselves all the time, but when an autistic quote-unquote person does it, because nobody cares, because there's no social currency to be had from people who are complying to systems by talking or listening to the person who's already deemed to be outcast and different. Just saying. Now, these are just my theories, of course. You know, feel free to correct them underneath and tell me how wrong I am, but I hardly ever get comments on any of my videos anyway, so maybe this will be the first one that actually gets some, because I'm really swinging at some hornet's nest here. Let's see how far I can go with giving you some Deutschland truth over American psyops. Just like in a board game, we have to wait our turn to talk in conversations. The rules of a game can be memorized, but it can be hard to memorize the rules of conversation. Let me tell you about the chess club I'm a part of. It's funny, but those boys with autism diagnoses know more rules about chess than I ever knew in my entire life. So it's not a problem with following rules. It's a matter of following rules that you actually care about, that are actually relevant to the life to which you want to live. You know, we don't force people to live under Sharia law who have no interaction with Islam and are not Muslim. And why are we imposing rules on people who do not want to follow them or follow that particular person? You cannot get someone to follow someone they do not respect, not truly. The only leadership that is worth following is leadership that is self-chosen and proves their leadership through acts of service, kindness, authenticity, and moral fortitude, among other things, okay? So if you have a disrespectful person in a position of leadership, the programming of you should respect them because they're older than you is a way of breaking the discernment that a child naturally has to tell truth from fiction. So continuing forward, man, this is a long book. Let me take a little drink. Okay. Can't interrupt anybody if I'm the only one talking, huh? Saying what you mean. Often in conversation, people say things they don't quite mean. They might say things to make what they are saying more interesting or even make people laugh. For example, someone might use the expression, "It's raining cats and dogs on a rainy day." But this doesn't mean animals are falling from the sky. It just means it's raining a lot. People with autism might take expressions seriously and not realize when people are exaggerating. Let's cross out exaggerating and put lying. Okay? To an autistic person, quote unquote, it's a small child, you know, we're encouraging metaphors that already break the idea of reality, okay? Is it really so hard to say, wow, it's really raining hard outside, versus using some sort of useless metaphor? Not really. It's just social conditioning to further break people from their own sense of discernment and reality. Now, you can agree with me or not because you've been living in this, you know, the frog that lives in the boiling pot, in the slowly heated pot of water, thinks everything is perfectly fine, you know? Or to use a Sufi metaphor, you know, the fly that's living in the puddle of piss on a leaf thinks that he's the commander of his own sea. Okay. Dictionaries that define and explain everyday sayings can be very helpful if you have autism. So why don't we have an entire codex that explains all the little social lies that people go through so that you can participate in everyday conversation based on nonsense? Great. What we really could do is we could just clarify our language and not use useless metaphors or, projections, because more clear our language is, the less metaphor we use, the easier it is and clearer it is to communicate to everybody, not just people who are allegedly autistic. Many people think that people with autism like to be on their own. Sometimes they do, but this is not always the case. That's anybody. Feeling unable to keep up with conversation could leave people with autism feeling left out. Always be patient and try to include your friends with autism. The person who is othered from a group feels left out from a group. Wow, that's new. Another thing that can be difficult to understand is if you have autism is sarcasm. Sarcasm is when people say the exact opposite of what they mean in order to be funny or to point out something that they think is very obvious. For example, someone might roll their eyes and say, lovely weather we're having, even though it's raining outside. This can be confusing if you have autism. What if you like rain? If I see that it's raining outside, I will say it's lovely weather outside because I love rain and thunderstorms. It's like, wow, this is awesome weather. So this is already implying social conditioning. Okay, the only weather that is supposed to be considered good is sunny weather. No other preference for weather is accepted. You have to confine and like what other people like, define what other people define in the way that they define it, or you're considered disordered. You cannot think in any other way. You cannot think outside the box. You cannot define things in any other way other than which they've been defined by people dumber than you. Good job, America. We can already show that these programs that have started, to pathologize these children are falling apart by the fact that you can even see this video in the first place. So, thank God for that. Freedom of speech increases when oppression decreases. Asperger's syndrome. Asperger's syndrome, sometimes called Asperger or AS, is just one of the conditions on the autism spectrum. It is named after a pediatrician named Hans Asperger who worked with children who showed signs of this type of autism. AS is similar in a lot of ways to other autism spectrum disorders. Yeah, that was considered the quote-unquote autistic kids, the defiant kids, who were still able to work. And this was actually a Nazi scientist. That's why we don't use the term Asperger's anymore. Let's see when this book was published, because this is, that's actually a dirty word in the autism community. Okay, so it was made in New York. There's no publisher. Oh my goodness, there's no publisher. Okay, Power Kids Press, New York. Wait, here we go. I'm wrong. Okay, 2019. Okay, so this propaganda was made in 2019 from New York. Okay. For example, if you have AS, you may find understanding other people difficult. However, unlike children with other disorders on the autism spectrum, children with Asperger's normally find reading, writing, and learning much easier than other people their age. So they're geniuses and they don't understand the other stupid kids around them. There's this book, there is a short story by Mark Clifton, okay, named Star Bright. Highly recommend that, okay? Remember, Star Bright, Mark Clifton. Necessary reading, okay? Got it? Good. Okay, Asperger's pronounced with a hard G to rhyme with burger. Okay. Often people with Asperger talk using words that are very grown up and advanced for their age. However, there is more communication than just words. People use all sorts of things to communicate, such as tone of voice, pitch, facial expression, and body language. For example, someone may speak in a high pitch and smile to show they are excited. If someone has Asperger's syndrome, they may find it hard to understand these more complicated ways of communicating. Yeah, because most of these performative acts are false. And it comes across to somebody who's smarter as someone being shallow, fake, and not someone who you want to talk to. Like, oh my God! Like, no. Automatically, it's like, you know that reaction's fake. That's not how anybody really feels. So we're automatically counting stoicism as an illness. Good job, America. For lots of people, yawning is catching. If your friend yawns, you're likely to yawn too. People with autism are much less likely to catch yawns because they don't conform to social cues. When somebody yawns and somebody else yawns in response, that's a way of showing simpatico. When you don't yawn back, you don't have simpatico to that person. And if you're IQ is high enough or you're othered enough by other people, you're not going to have simpatico with anybody. You're not going to be seeking to mirror anybody. So that's what yawning is. It's mirroring. It's creating a social connection between two people. But if there's no social connection already existent, then there's going to be no mirroring between two people. If they're too different in intellect, too different in background, and too different in ethic, there's no reason to mirror, okay? And also, mirroring, is that really an authentic form of communication between two strangers? I mean, it's one thing if you like somebody and you get along with them, or you respect what they're doing, but mirroring something as stupid as a yawn, how does that really matter socially? So when somebody yawns in reaction to, it just shows the depth of the programming of how they're supposed to react and repeat exactly what they hear socially without discernment and without thinking first. You don't think first, I really need to yawn. How many of you yawned and replied to that? Probably very few of you. I'll be surprised. Special interest. Many people with autism have special interest. Oh, you mean like talents? Okay. Which are hobbies, pastimes, or topics that they find especially interesting. Yeah, because normal people don't have interests. They have what people tell them they're supposed to like, whether that be football or ballet. So, oops. Or whatever their family thinks that they're supposed to like. This is especially common for people with Asperger's syndrome, but people with autism spectrum disorder have special interests too. A special interest may be a certain game, book, or TV show, but it's often something more unique, such as trains or maps. They find a specialization early, and then they're pathologized for it. Good job, America. Good job for, completely shooting the entire, public transit system in the foot, because we have all these potential railway conductors, and we have no functional rail system that's actually effective for most of our population. You want to know what to do with all these kids who are obsessed with trains? Make them into conductors and put them in charge of setting up actual functional public transportation and reactivating the public civilian rail system. We can transport goods and services by rail, but yet we can't put on an extra car or two for people, except for Amtrak, which is incredibly limited and doesn't even go to most of our cities. I don't know if the outside knows that, but that's why we're so dependent on cars. We do not have a functional rail system. Not truly. Not outside the East Coast. And even then, it's not functional compared to Europe. Lots of people with autism have a special interest in trains. Some experts think this is because trains have schedules, and many people with autism like to have schedules in their day-to-day lives. So do military. People with special interests can be very helpful, and people often turn a special interest into a career. For example, someone who's very interested in trains might get a job on a train or in a train station. So we have a disorder that makes you better at your job. Let's get this straight. My disorder makes me better at my job. Then is it a disorder or is it a psyop? Okay, let's continue. However, some people might get absorbed in their special interests that they struggle to concentrate on other things. Okay, so they're dedicated to what they study. Especially in school, they might not understand why others aren't as interested in their special interests as they are. They might want to talk about a lot about their favorite thing, but not realize it's not the right time. Because they're not around other people who like the same stuff they do. They're in the wrong place. Put the kids who like trains with the other kids that like trains. Put the kids who like chess with the other kids that like chess. It's not rocket science, people. You're just stupid. Okay? I'm sorry that they've put lead in your water, filled you full of PFAs, and completely dumbed you down with red number 40 and all these other artificial preservatives, hormones, whatever in your foods, and you don't know how to eat cleanly or think clearly. However, I still think that there's hope for most of you. Maybe. We'll see. Most of the people who watch this are not idiots. I don't really think that anybody who would be an idiot would actually last beyond the badge numbers. So, congratulations, you made it this far. You're probably a genius. And you're probably actually even smarter than me. So, all of my arrogance, it's simply not even arrogance. It's literally just fed up with the reality in which that we find ourselves here, where anti-intellectualism is seen as a standard to hold up on a higher pedestal, and actual intellectuals are trampled into the dust. And it starts here in childhood, telling kids that their special interests, that their genius and their frustrations are pathology and not a reaction to incredibly antagonistic circumstances. Case study Peter. My name is Peter and I have a type of autism called Asperger's syndrome. My favorite thing is to play computer games, especially Minecraft. When I'm not playing Minecraft, I like to watch other people play it on YouTube. My Asperger's makes talking to other people hard and sometimes boring. I like computer games because I don't have to concentrate on what other people are saying and I can play all by myself. Yeah, he's not going to be made fun of. He's not going to be othered. He's not going to be treated badly. Is he talking to other people on Minecraft? Probably. Maybe. There's the greatest library that we have right now is on a Minecraft server. You know? Mom says I'm not allowed to play computer games when we have guests because I will sometimes forget they are there and ignore them. Mom says it's rude to ignore guests. I don't mean to be rude. Mom usually sets a timer. When the alarm goes off, I have to save my game and turn off the computer. I like having things timed. It makes me feel like everything is in order. I don't like it when things take longer than they should. Luckily, Mom knows how to help me stay calm when things don't go as planned. Who are the guests? Do they care about what he cares about? Do they care about him? Or does the family or the guest or whatever, is it all a great big, social thing to try and get people to conform to their roles and play social games that this child has no interest in? Oh, hi, how are you? Oh, we just came back from our yachting trip, blah, 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 blah. We went tubing down the Delaware. We did this, we did that. Do you think a boy who's interested in Minecraft is going to care about what guests, especially adults, are saying, especially if he's not the topic of conversation and has nothing to contribute? I know how awkward it was to be a kid. I was one once, surprisingly. It wasn't a good time. Other autism spectrum disorders. PDA. Have you ever been looking forward to going to a friend's birthday party, but when the day arrived, you didn't want to get dressed and go? Or maybe you've been really hungry for dinner, but when someone cooked it for you, you suddenly didn't want to eat. It can be hard to understand why we do these things, but a lot of the times because we feel pressured by people around us. So they are resistant to pressure from other people around them. When we feel pressured, we might feel anxious and might want to avoid doing things we were expected to do. This anxiety can be especially intense for people with PDA, a type of autism spectrum disorder. That's a type of trauma. When you get screamed at all the time when you're a kid and told that you have to do things a certain way, eventually you stop wanting to do them. There's two outcomes. Either you break yourself and become compliant, or you start to resist all authority because it triggers you to the original authority figure who yelled at you, who abused you, who beat you. So we're taking traumatized children and we're telling them that it's their fault that they're abused. Because again, if you look at the studies, there is no difference between childhood CPTSD symptoms and the symptoms of childhood autism. It's not autism that causes problems, it's the culture that severs children from their own sense of integrity, their own genius, and recognizing their own unique needs. It's funny how autism as a diagnosis can fit a spectrum of people, but yet we cannot accommodate a spectrum of people without pathologizing them and saying there are accommodations that they need for being individuals, for their own talents, abilities, and what they need to feel fulfilled, is unrealistic. Many people with autism struggle with the expectations, demands of the world around them. Some struggle more than others. For people who have PDA, even getting dressed for school in the morning might feel like an impossible task. Well, yeah, if you don't want to go, getting dressed for any place you don't want to go is an impossible task. You have to force yourself to do it. Yeah, I don't want to go here, but you know what? I'm going to dress up and still make a good showing. When you're a little kid, you don't have that intellectual override. All you know is that you don't want to go to a place where they're going to hurt you and make you feel other, and they tell you that everything that you do, that you say, that you think is wrong because it's not part of a script. Okay? In the same way that people with other autism spectrum disorders might want to scream, shout, and not do as they are told when they feel overwhelmed with sensory information, people with PDA might feel like this when asked to do something that makes them feel anxious. So we're telling people to go against their inner knowing, okay? So you have kids literally screaming in protest against, the environment that they're in, being forced into situations with bright lights and many people to numb them, desensitize them, and make them into good little robots like dumb kids are. So, oops. PDA stands for pathological demand avoidance. Funny that you can also, PDA is also, that thing about touching people when they don't want to be touched. I forget what that stands for. Forgive me, because I may be in intelligence, but I'm not always intelligent, okay? Case study Anya. My name is Anya, and I have a type of autism called PDA. Because of my PDA, I like to know when things are happening. I don't like it when plans change. Wow, I know many adults who don't have autism diagnosis who are like that. You know what they are? They're corporate executives. I often have to ask my mom over and over again what time I have to leave the house to go somewhere. I know lots of people have to do that with their personal secretaries in the offices that they work, particularly lawyers. Okay. Keeping her answer in my head can be difficult sometimes. I have lots of thoughts going around in my head and I can get distracted very easily. I have to put all my toys away before bed. Otherwise, I will want to play with them in the morning when I'm getting ready for school, and this can make me forget to do things, like put my homework in my school bag. So this child prioritizes the things that she wants to do over what she is told to do. So her non-compliance with the program is being pathologized, as opposed to recognize, why does she want to play with toys as opposed to going to school? What is she not getting at school? School should be an environment where her skills and talents are enriched and nurtured, not a place that she wants to avoid and play with her toys instead. On the inside of our front door, Mom has a written checklist of all the things I need to remember to take to school: a notebook, pencils, pens, ruler, crayons. At school, we had to do a project on farm animals. I was really excited, but when I got to do it at home, it made me want to cry. I was worried I wouldn't get it done on time and that my teacher would be mad. Well, why would she think that the teacher would be mad if a teacher hasn't been mad at her prior? Do you see the signs of abuse that are just kind of skipped over here? I'm afraid that a teacher's going to get mad. Why would you be afraid of a teacher getting mad if a teacher's never gotten mad at you before? And also, why would there be a teacher who is getting angry at students? If you can't maintain your emotional equilibrium as you're teaching elementary school students, you should not be teaching at all. If you cannot be calm and collected and understand that these are children, you have no right to be in education. Just like you have no right to be in intelligence if you fabricate information, considering we have live cameras and satellites since 2003. At least, but to the extent that we do now, since 2003. But trust me, we had them even before then. Okay. I panicked and I was mean to my mom and my brother when they tried to help. I didn't want to be mean. I didn't remember what I said afterwards, but PDA makes things like homework feel like a huge, scary monster. My brother helped me build a tent in my room where I can go and calm down when I feel overwhelmed, so I can isolate myself and feel safe. That's what's not said there. A tent is what isolates you from other people to give you a sense of safety, because other people feel unsafe. This is the new hysteria. We're taking child abuse and we're relabeling it as autism. Good job, America. Good job. Okay, this is another reason why, hey guys, work on my extraction, the extraction of my team. This is not a good place for intellectuals or my godchildren, okay? Any of my murid, any of my colleagues that have kids, I have concerns. Okay, we need to get them out of this and into good schools, real schools, please. Inshallah, okay? Autism and other disorders, ADHD. People with autism are also more likely to have certain conditions that are not on the autism spectrum. For example, lots of children with autism get diagnosed with ADHD. ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. This is when your brain has trouble staying focused on one thing and your body has trouble keeping still. So you're a kid. Got it. Okay. When you have autism and ADHD, it can be difficult to know when it's okay to be hyperactive and when it's not, like a classroom. Okay, so little kids are naturally active, and we're teaching them how not to be active so that we can make them into cattle. Got it. Okay. Let's take all that energy and youth from the child and just absolutely crush it underneath the heel of capitalism. Let's go. Forget fidget toys like this can help people with ADHD focus their brains because it gives their bodies something to do as they're in horrible captivity. OCD and anxiety. Many people with autism spectrum also experience OCD. All of these are trauma reactions, by the way. All this right here are reactions to trauma. These are not inherent in most people without having some sort of prior trauma. We are pathologizing victims and saying that they have disorders rather than addressing what is happening to cause the disorders. These are the real disorders, and this is a reaction not divorce, but sometimes divorce. This is a reaction to abuse, okay? These are abuse reactions. These are symptoms of victimization, okay? Many people with autism spectrum disorder also experience OCD. OCD stands for obsessive compulsive disorder and is a type of anxiety disorder. This means a person gets unwelcome thoughts, obsessions, feels strong need to do a movement or action, a compulsion to calm the thoughts. A trait of both autism and OCD is liking routine and getting anxious when things are changed. This anxiety becomes so bad it frightens you or takes up a lot of your time and may be a sign of OCD. Autism stims and OCD compulsions often look similar, and it is possible to experience both. The difference is stims feel good and relaxing, whereas compulsions are caused by anxious thoughts. Again, this is captivity behaviors. My God, astaghfirullah. We don't have that much of this left, so hang in there with me, kids, okay? Auntie, Uncle, Alex, Marco, whatever you want to call me, is reading you a bedtime story. And, well, this is probably why all my god kids ended up so kind of surly. Also, I could never do the voices in Lord of the Rings like anybody's, mom, dad, or grandpa could do. So I can't do funny voices. All I can do is critique material. Oops. I'm just the way that I am. Oops. Living with autism. People with autism might need more support than others at school or even at home. Autistic traits are part of a huge spectrum. So what's a huge spectrum? We said this again. Birds. Hummingbirds and hawks. That's a huge spectrum. Are they the same thing? They're both birds. How big of the spectrum does it have to be before you realize that the spectrum is fake? And most people have some traits that are linked to autism. And most people have some traits linked to autism. Most people have some traits that are linked to genius. But we stomp them out early and make sure that they lose all ability for independent thought as quickly as possible and destroy their little sense of integrity and their souls. Okay. At one end of the spectrum, traits are mild. People with mild autism are said to have a hidden disability of what? Social noncompliance? Because it still affects their schoolwork, life, and friendships, but other people might not realize that they need extra help. Today, people are more aware of autism, and it's diagnosed more often so that people get the help that they need to be compliant, conformative, and quiet. That addition is mine. Some research shows that girls are less likely to be diagnosed with autism than boys because they're more likely to hide autistic traits because they get abused more. People should never have to hide who they are. This entire book is hiding who people are. What happened to geniuses? Now they're all autistic. We don't have any genius in the United States. We just have pathology. At the other end of the spectrum, autistic traits can be much more severe and noticeable. It can be hard for children with more noticeable autistic traits to fit in at school. People with autism might experience bullying at some point in their lives because they're seen as different. Bullying is never okay. If you or someone you know is being bullied, it's important to tell a trusted adult. Everyone has things about them that make them unique. We should celebrate our differences. You know who else is bullied often? Victims of abuse to get re-victimized. An autistic child, quote-unquote autistic child, who has the same symptoms as CPTSD, is getting re-victimized by the same type of people who victimized them in the first place, just in child form. The formant, the compliant. It is a compliance machine that beats down the outliers. You're destroying your own geniuses and wondering why our intelligence is lower than anybody else. We did it to ourselves, or rather, our systems allowed this to happen, and so many of you have perpetuated this in your own ignorance. And then you wonder why I dislike most people. But the thing is, even though I dislike you and I disrespect the fact that you don't have any integrity, for many of you, that doesn't mean that I'm not going to try and help you and not try to educate you. So here's me attempting to educate you and how to be less of an offensive, lying dirtbag that you've been trained to be, to teach you how to have a renewed sense of integrity in all of your activities going forward, and to see things clearly versus through the psyops that you're told and the cattle chutes that you've been put through into your mind that makes you pathologize other people and outcast them because they're smarter than you. I hope that you're learning something from me today, because this is my way of improving the world, through direct, brutal, unfiltered honesty. And if you don't like it, take it up with my God above me. Everything that is ever done is done with the permission of God, even if you don't follow. If we believe in one united creator, all things are from that creator, and whatever has happened is permitted by that creator, including this lecture to you. It might not be the nicest lecture, might not be a lecture that you like or be one that's socially acceptable. It might not be one that would be accepted in any major university in the world. But that doesn't take away the truth or value of what I have to say to you, just because it's not given to you in a format that is pleasing, kind, or false. My type of kindness is maybe a bit different than what you're used to. I like stripping away false layers and showing things the way they really are. However, I also like to have true correction from people who are smarter or better versed in things than myself. I don't stand solid on things. I'm always willing to be overridden and, examine things from a new avenue. That's one of the signs and hallmarks of intelligence. It's not a pathology. It's literally just reevaluating things after being given new information. So we have one page left. In the past, autism wasn't very well understood. Neither was genius. And people who had it weren't very well understood either. Neither was genius. However, today we know much more about autism and how it affects people. We now know that people with autism see the world differently than others, and this could be a good thing. Yeah, honest view of how the world is around us. Boy, are you guys going to need that as this economy continues to collapse. You know, good job making all the smart people feel like they're stupid. Boy, I bet you guys are going to regret that in the future. Everybody is unique and no two people with autism are the same. Then how is it the same condition? You know, leprosy is the same regardless of who has leprosy for the most part. You know, you can kind of know what the symptoms are. Someone with diabetes is always going to have high blood sugar. But if you can't define autism because it just happens to be anybody who's on the outside, then it's not a real condition, it's a psyop. Okay, learning things that make us different is important, can help people with conditions like autism be understood and be given the support that they need. What they need is to be challenged with things that they actually enjoy, to be allowed to explore their natural inclinations and hobbies and not to be silenced when they speak the truth. One thing that is not in any of these books is the sense of truth and justice that I've seen in a lot of autism diagnoses for adults, you know, strong sense of internal justice, as if that's some sort of pathology as well. Then we have the glossary, we have body language, things that the person does with their body that tell you how they feel, a career, a job, or a series of jobs that you do during your working life, communicating, the passing of information between two or more people, contagious, able to be spread from person to person, deadline, a time or day which something must be done. Things get done when they need to get done or they don't get done. The only consequences come from other people. And what do you fear more, other people or God? Most of you are going to say other people because you don't believe in God, and that's fine. You're not me. And that's okay, as long as you don't get in my way or in the way of other people as you live your life. You shouldn't be paying attention to other people and how their non-harmful behaviors make you uncomfortable. What you should be doing is examining why you are uncomfortable by other people's non-harmful behaviors, including stimming, speaking in ways that you don't understand, or speaking with truth as opposed to common scripts that you expect that make you feel comfortable in the lies that you have been broken into since your very first day of education. Let's see, let's go. We have deadline, time or day when something must be done, diagnose when a disease or illness has been identified by a doctor, disorder, a physical or mental sickness or ailment, dyslexia, learning disability surrounding reading or words, exaggerating, distort a truth about something to make it seem greater, expression, a phrase that has different meanings like raining cats and dogs, facial expression, what a person does with their face to show emotions or reactions, filter, to ignore or remove some things, hidden disability, disability or difficulty that can't easily be seen because it doesn't exist. Hyperactive, very active or stimulated. Interact, responding to others socially. Keep up, to understand and deal with something that is moving or changing very fast. Memorize, to have committed to memory. Pediatrician, doctor who specializes in children's medicine. Pressured, feeling pushed into doing something, especially if you don't want to. Children, even children should have a right to say no within reason. You have to have patience with children. If you don't have patience with children, you shouldn't be teaching them. If you can't get a kid to respect you enough to, whatever, in a classroom by the time they're 8 or 9, when they've reached the age of reason, then that's the fault of the faculty, not the fault of the child. Or the fault of more likely, it's the fault of the system. Okay. Schedules, timetables or plans for activity or period of time, severe, very serious or intense, social settings, somewhere people are around others, example, a party, stimulating, provoking a response, traits, qualities, or characteristics of a person. And then that is the end of the book. So that is the pathologization of American genius. There's no longer gifted programs outside of the rich and the affluent, and the impoverished are being put onto psychotropic medications and given books like that to be told and re-victimized again and again about how they're different for not conforming to social scripting. I hope that this has been informative to you and that you have looked past your own offense and your dislike of how I present things to take at least some grains of truth from this, and that you yourself will reconsider how you pathologize and look at other people and maybe question the psyops around you a little bit more thoroughly. So with that being said, Assalamu alaikum, Koda Hafez, and Auf Wiedersehen. May Allah guide us to a straight pathway always. And if you want me to be kinder, then pray for Allah to relieve my circumstances, give me back pay, and extract my entire team from the United States where we can live happier lives around our peers so that we're no longer burdening you with the discomfort that we provide with you. obviously we don't fit in here. So we would like to be with people like ourselves so we can better serve our God, our nation, and global population in the ways from which we see need to happen. Because neurotypicals and dumb people sure aren't going to care about others because it's not in their best interest, unless it's somebody within their own social group. All right? Well, take care. I'd say that I love you, but I probably don't. Maybe I do some of you, and you know who you are. So, Assalamu alaikum.